You're listening to the Mind Over Murder podcast.
My name is Bill Thomas. I'm a writer, consulting producer, and now podcaster. I am now trying to use my experience as the brother of a murder victim to help other victims of violent crime. I'm working on a book on the unsolved Colonial Parkway Murders, and I'm the co-administrator of the Colonial Parkway Murders Facebook group together with Kristin Dilley.
My name is Kristin Dilley. I'm a writer, a researcher, a teacher, and a victims advocate, as well as the social media manager and co-administrator for the Colonial Parkway Murders Facebook page with my partner in crime, Bill Thomas. Welcome to Mind Over Murder. I'm Kristin Dilley.
And I'm Bill Thomas.
And we're back again continuing our coverage of the Idaho 4 probable cause affidavit, not Alpha David, correct?
That's turned into a bit of a joke on the internet, which I understand. I have said before in comments on social media regarding the Idaho 4 affidavit, we all have spell check on most of the devices we use. Even if you tried to spell affidavit, it would come up. I know because I tried it. I'm not any kind of legal expert, and I'm certainly not an attorney. I don't get how the fact that people literally didn't even understand the word then feel very comfortable weighing in on all sorts of legal and forensic issues, investigation techniques. I mean, I guess everybody's got an opinion on the World Wide Web.
I was about to say, everybody's got an opinion and everybody wants to weigh in, even if you don't know all the facts. That is just a fact of life on the internet.
I think a little bit more research might be called for. There was a ton of good coverage about this case. The case has probably been the most high-profile multiple murder, I would say, in years. This case has gotten a tremendous amount of coverage. I don't know if folks actually bothered to read the articles, watch some of the news clips. I still haven't even seen the 2020 and Dateline coverage from a few days ago. I'll get a chance at one of these days. I know you've always got papers to grade and classes to conduct, and you're a very busy person in addition to hosting a podcast. But there's a lot of good information and some solid analysis. I've actually taken the time to watch, like I watched Cheryl Mack McCollum the other day with Joe Scott Morgan on CrimeCon on an invitation-only event, and their analysis was fascinating, absolutely fascinating. So there's a lot of really good coverage. It's just very clear that people need to be paying a little bit more attention in terms of how investigations work, how prosecutions actually come together. And I'm not claiming to be an expert on any of this stuff, but we've always said on Mind Over Murder, for us, the two of us as co-hosts, it's about listening and learning. And I don't mind getting schooled every single day because I think that may help us going forward, understanding whether it's my sister's case or any other case.
Yeah.
This whole process over the last 3 years for the two of us has been educational.
Yeah.
Seems like some other folks probably could benefit from some of the same.
No, I agree. I think we are just so used to living in an instantaneous reaction sort of world that people will just weigh in no matter how much or how little research they have done on it. It is always entertaining looking at the comment section on the posts of our friends who are invested in the case or in the outcome or are speaking as experts, because you will have people who are like, yes, I agree. This is fantastic. What a great job that they're doing. And then you'll have the people who are like, I will be combative and tell you that you don't know what you're doing and that I know how to do it better. And it's always a pleasure watching people get schooled, quite frankly, who are willing to go to Mac and say, you don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, she does, actually.
Good luck with that.
Yeah. It has been interesting. I think a whole sociological study could be done on the way that people interact on true crime message boards.
You think?
Honestly, it is very interesting, but also a little bit confounding at times and a little bit angry making at others.
You're absolutely right, though, Kristin. When I see comments or discussion on Facebook groups or other social media, people that have made really good points, oftentimes I'll make a little mental note. When that Kristin Dilley weighs in, she's got some interesting things to say. And then in particular, if we're lucky enough to get real experts to weigh in, I think to myself, oh, she knows a lot about investigative genetic genealogy. If she's commenting, I want to know what she's got to say about this case or any other. I do try to pay attention to the people that really seem to know what they're talking about. I don't know, though. I get very frustrated. At first, you were saying something about how entertaining it was, and I thought, boy, you must be looking at different websites than I am, because I see a lot of really highly opinionated drivel.
No, I agree, but I think it's entertaining the same way that as a classroom teacher, there is always one kid who assumes that they are smarter than I am. And this happens to every teacher in every classroom. It is always a little bit of it's obnoxious at first when you know, okay, this kid is going to have to be taken down a peg or two. But it does actually at some point or another turn kind of entertaining. Okay, you're wrong. I can tell you that you're wrong. And it's actually a little amusing at some points, but it depends on the day. And it does depend on the subject matter too. If a kid in my class tried to school me on true crime right now, I would just laugh and go, okay. All right, let's see you try. Go ahead.
I give you a lot of credit for patience, you and every other teacher. I just can't help but ask, on a percentage basis, these people that are explaining how things really work to you, percentage would be male versus female.
It does tend to be males more than females. But that is not to say that I haven't occasionally in my classroom or other colleagues' classrooms heard stories about both sides of the coin attempting to one-up a subject matter expert.
Right. Although I almost use the expression mansplaining, which would have been a dead giveaway where I was going with this. But my sense was, having seen it any number of times in classrooms, and I do enjoy going to school and I do enjoy learning, I just feel like a solid, 75 or 80% of the time, the person pontificating about something and offering opinions that make it clear that they think they're smarter than the teacher seems like it's more of a guy thing.
And we do see it a lot on all the different true crime boards that we're talking about and our friends who have to deal with the same thing. And I think because the balance of true crime aficionados does tend to skew more toward the female side.
Yes.
I think you do get a little bit more in terms of a woman I like your term pontificating. And maybe I do look at better and more entertaining boards than you do, because
I hope so.
I don't get as hot under the collar about it. It's just, okay, but this person's going to go ahead and school them.
They often do.
As soon as they get a chance to go to the comment section, they're going to school this person. So I'll just come back every once in a while and check and see if they've been if they've been put in their proper place, shall we? The internet is an interesting place to most days, but when we're in the middle of a hot true crime case, I feel like it's even more, because for every piece of really good, solid commentary and reporting, you do have I am an armchair sleuth. I am a self-determined expert. Allow me to pontificate to the world why I am right. And some of those people can be obnoxious, but a lot of times I think they're just entertaining.
The other thing, too, is that in an unsolved case, and for instance, this case in Idaho is currently unsolved, although there has been a suspect placed under arrest, it is sometimes very interesting for people to toss ideas out. And so I actually have seen interesting theories, and I'll admit, even though sometimes it's frustrating, I'll recognize that people have tossed out ideas or theories or whatever, and I thought, I never looked at it from that point of view. So I can't say that it's all a waste of time. I had joined one group to observe the conversation. I did participate a few times, but ultimately I found that this group just turned into endless, bizarre cornucopia of conspiracy theories. And I ended up stepping away from it because people will start the most inane conversations. And I think to myself, this is not a good use of my time. I have so many other things I need to get done. I'm not going to waste time on this. But then every once in a while, somebody will come along with something that's surprising and they have a fresh perspective. So wheat being separated from chaff and all that.
And we hope, by the way, that we are offering reasoned, considered, logical, and thoughtful opinions, and that people are not looking at us and our coverage and going, oh, them, they don't know what they're talking about. We're trying very hard. We just spent a very fruitful 90 minutes talking to Cheryl McCollum about her thoughts on the case. And boy, did she give me a lot to think about.
That podcast ran a couple of days ago, so I think it's going to be a very enjoyable listen if you haven't had a chance to catch it. Anytime Cheryl McCollum is appearing, it's worthwhile. And I learn something every single time we talk to her.
Absolutely. We're going to get back into the affidavit. The last time that we left off on this probable cause affidavit, we had seen a very thorough discussion about cell phone sites and all of the information that connected Bryan Kohberger's car, suspect vehicle 1, to all of the different cell phone pings that were happening around the King Road residence. So we have, I would say, maybe 3 more pages of the affidavit to get through. So we're just going to jump right back in. I'll read, Bill will do his colorful commentary, and we will continue presenting this information for your edification. All right, we're picking back up on the probable cause affidavit. For anyone following along at home, this is page 15. Based on my training experience and the facts of the investigation thus far, I believe that Kohberger, the user of the 8458 phone, was likely the driver of the white Elantra that is observed departing Pullman, Washington, and that this vehicle is likely suspect vehicle 1. Additionally, the route of travel of the 8458 phone during the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022, and the lack of the 8458 phone reporting to AT&T between 2:47 a.m. and 4:48 a.m. is consistent with Kohberger attempting to conceal his location during the quadruple homicide that occurred at the King Road residence.
One thing that's interesting to note, and you get into it in the next section, is he occasionally turned the phone off, particularly on November 13th, which is the night of the murders, but wasn't in the habit of turning off the phone at different times. And I'll let you get into more detail here in the affidavit.
On December 23rd, 2022, I was granted a search warrant for Kohberger's historical CSLI, that is cell site data, from June 23rd, 2022 to current prospective location information, and a pen register trap and trace on the 8458 phone to aid in efforts to determine if Kohberger stalked any of the victims in this case prior to the offense, conducted surveillance on the King Road residence, was in contact with any of the victim's associates before or after the alleged offense, any locations that may contain evidence of the murders that occurred on November 13th, 2022, the location of the white Elantra registered to Kohberger, as well as the location of Kohberger. As an English teacher, that was a terrible run-on sentence, but I understand why he had to do it. Let's talk a little bit about the stalking. Bill, you have a theory as to where he may have come in contact with the victims here. Would you like to share that?
Yeah, I was thinking about this quite a bit. And when we talked to Mac the other day, she believes that the 2 women that lived on the 3rd floor of the residence, Maddie and Kaylee, were likely targets, and that otherwise it didn't make sense for him to go up the narrow stairs up to the 3rd floor, from which there was no escape. You go up there, and we've seen the diagrams. You've got the narrow set of stairs, and I believe there's 2 bedrooms up there, but it's very tight. And she believes that he was targeting those 2 women. And then the 2nd floor couple, Xana and Ethan, were secondary targets, and they may have wanted him, or he may have made a decision to kill the 2 of them based on being seen or concern of witnesses. I was just thinking about this quite a bit based on some additional reading and research that I'd done. We know that the suspect is purportedly a vegetarian, and that he had become strictly vegan as a result of kind of a health kick. He had lost weight in high school, began working out. For it is philosophical or health or other reasons, he becomes a vegan. When you Google good vegan restaurants in Moscow, the Mad Greek restaurant comes up number 1 in internet search. Both Kaylee and Maddie worked there. And I've never met these young women, and obviously I never will. My sense of it is that these are two very attractive, bubbly, upbeat, fun young people. They were very well liked at the restaurant. And my sense is that they probably would have attracted a fair amount of attention. And that attention might include somebody like Bryan Kohberger. As we've talked about, Kristin, this affidavit is nowhere near the complete picture of all of the information that law enforcement has developed. There's so much more that we will likely learn at trial, perhaps in summer 2023, if and when this case goes to trial. But I think this is the kind of thing that may come out, is that he was stalking them for a period of months. I think something like the Mad Greek restaurant could be the nexus point where he and his limited time in that area, he'd only reported to the program at Pullman, Washington, at the University of Washington a few months prior. But he seems to have fixated on some of these young people very early on. And I think this could easily be something like the Mad Greek restaurant ends up being the place where this all starts, with his obsession and stalking these young people.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good guess. On December 23rd, 2022, pursuant to that search warrant, I received historical records for the 8458 phone from AT&T from the time the account was opened in June 2022. After consulting with CAST, SA, I was able to determine estimated locations for the 8458 phone from June 2022 to present, the time period authorized by the court. The records for the 8458 phone show the phone utilizing cellular resources that provide coverage to the area of 1122 King Road on at least 12 occasions prior to November 13th, 2022. All of these occasions, except for one, occurred in the late evening and early morning hours of their respective days.
Couple of quick observations. The CAST SA is special agent, so he's referencing these highly trained FBI agents who have a specialty, which is they do this analysis of cell phone records, the movement and use of cell phones, and there's a little bit of a nomenclature in there. Of course, the key point, Kristin, that you made is he's in the immediately adjacent area, that is the place where his cell phone is pinging on the nearest, it's usually 2 or 3 towers that would serve 1122 King Road, the location of the murders. That puts him in that neighborhood, in that cul-de-sac, a dozen times prior to the night of the murder. And that just seems completely out of character unless he had a reason to be continually in that very close-in neighborhood.
Yeah.
His defense attorneys have got to find a way to explain that away, and I think that's going to be very difficult. Why is he constantly going through that neighborhood in the late evening and early morning hours on a dozen occasions?
Agreed. When you had mentioned the idea of going to trial, I am curious if this is actually going to go to trial or if he's going to plead out, maybe to get the death penalty taken off the table. That is something we had talked last episode about. Even folks who are not involved in true crime are interested in this. The dinner table conversation last night with my non-true crime watching parents was, what do you think is going to happen to this guy? When does this go to trial? And we discussed this idea. I think that the smartest thing for him to do eventually, I know he said he's looking forward to being exonerated. Buddy, you're not getting exonerated.
No.
I'm imagining that if I were him, I would make a plea deal to take the death penalty off the table and avoid going to trial. Ultimately, we'll, I guess, have to see what happens there.
What I'm being made crazy by is I've seen a number of people, and here we are, we're all armchair detectives, making the comment that they think that there's not enough in the affidavit. And I have commented, and I will continue to comment, everything in the affidavit is not everything they have. There's so much more. And they're probably still adding additional information as we speak. The Moscow Police Department, the Idaho State Police and the FBI have made this a very high priority case. They have put significant resources into this investigation. They have so much more to build a case against this suspect. If this case goes to trial, I think it'll be a very interesting case to watch unfold as the prosecution and the defense present their points of view. But there's no way that they're not putting forward a very strong presentation on the prosecution side that will make it very clear that Bryan Kohberger is involved in these 4 homicides.
Yeah, Mac was saying in our last episode how interesting it will be to see search results on his computer, work and home, in addition to anything that he searched for on his phone. I think that's going to be very telling. But yeah, I think it's important for people to remember that just because an arrest has been made, that does not mean that they're going to stop building a case. They're going to continue to investigate and uncover this guy and his movements and his behaviors. Now that they've got him in jail, it's not like they're going to stop and go, okay, we've got everything there is to get. They're going to keep going. And so you're right. There's going to be a lot more to this case. If for everybody out there, oh, this isn't very much at all, I'm sure they can get him off on a technicality or something. No, this isn't all they have, but it's a really good start. Because said before, all of our law enforcement friends have said before, and we have said before, this is a darn good piece of law enforcement work right here. It truly is. This is an excellent piece of the puzzle that they've put together, which is why we're taking the time to break it down for all of you.
You're listening to Mind Over Murder. We'll be right back after this word from our sponsors. We're back here at Mind Over Murder.
We're back with the affidavit talking about one of the 12 occasions in which Bryan Kohberger was in proximity to the King Road residence. One of these occasions on August 21st, 2022, the 8458 phone utilized cellular resources providing coverage to the King Road residence from approximately 10:34 p.m. to 11:35 p.m. At approximately 11:37 p.m., Kohberger was stopped by Latah County Sheriff's Deputy Corporal Duke, as mentioned above. The 8458 phone was utilizing cellular resources consistent with the location of the traffic stop during this time, Farm Road and Pullman Highway. So it's interesting that he's at that location at the residence for just over an hour. Maybe he's got a defense attorney who can explain, here's why he was in there for a dozen different times. What are you doing in a neighborhood for an hour? You driving around? You sitting in your car? What are you doing? I could maybe explain away being there on an occasion or two. If he's only there for 5-10 minutes, maybe he had to park, maybe he had to take a phone call. But how do you explain away sitting there and just watching this house for an hour? I find that hard to explain.
They might claim that he was friends with or had met one of the people that lived in that house or another house in the neighborhood, but they're going to have to corroborate that. One of the areas we're going to be able to break that down, I think, if they end up trying to explain it away with something along those lines is, so who's going to corroborate this? There are surviving roommates. So, for example, tragically, we've lost 4 young people that lived in that house, but there were 2 survivors as well, one of whom lived full-time in that residence and would likely know the people that would come and go. It occurred to me that it's possible this was known as a party house and people would come and go and there'd be big social gatherings. That Kohberger could have actually been in attendance at one of these events.
Yeah, could be.
I can't rule that out, but you'd think that somebody would remember him. He'd be a little bit older, perhaps 7 to 10 years older than the other people in attendance who were college freshmen to seniors. And he's age 28 at the time of the murders. So I think they're going to have a difficult time explaining away 12 visits to the neighborhood. I just think that's not going to fly.
Agreed. Back to the affidavit. Further analysis of the cellular data provided showed the 8458 phone utilized cellular resources on November 13th, 2022, consistent with the phone traveling from Pullman, Washington to Lewiston, Idaho via U.S. Highway 195. At approximately 12:36 p.m., the 8458 phone utilized cellular resources that would provide coverage to Kate's Cup of Joe coffee stand located at 810 Port Drive, Carlton, Washington. Surveillance footage from the U.S. Chef Store located at 820 Port Drive, Clarkston, Washington, and adjacent to Kate's Cup of Joe showed a white Elantra, consistent with suspect vehicle 1, drive past Kate's Cup of Joe at a time consistent with the cellular data from the 8458 phone.
So these digital breadcrumbs that all of us are dropping, they just build such a strong kind of schedule almost of everywhere his cell phone was, everywhere his vehicle was. Of course, note to self, if I ever decide to kill a bunch of people, perhaps I might want to leave my cell phone at home and use a different vehicle and a burner phone. But of course, apparently these things didn't occur to him. So a criminal mastermind, I think, was one of the expressions you used.
Exactly.
He's not.
Exactly. If nothing else brings to your attention the idea that you are being tracked everywhere you go by your phone, by traffic cams, by surveillance video at various stores, by Ring doorbells, this should be a reminder that you can't really move in secret anywhere that you go. It really is impossible to just drop off the radar, because no matter where you go during your day, you're going to be on a camera somewhere. And this really, just reading over this reinforced for me, wow, look at the number of places, even if you just take the sort of errands that you and I would run on a typical day, you're going to be on camera just about every place that you go. There's a camera at the bank. There's a camera at Target. Even when you do the self-checkout at Target, you're on a camera. There is no way to move around undetected in the current world that we live in. And that's even more so if you are constantly hooked to your cell phone, as most of us are.
Look at what's happening with this Boston case where this mother of 3 has disappeared. And even though the husband made some effort to hide his whereabouts, he still shows up, for example, at Home Depot on cameras there. He makes a cash purchase of $450 worth of cleaning supplies, which is very suspicious in and of itself. Even though he makes an effort not to use a credit card and not have his cell phone with him while he's in the store, they show him clearly on the store cameras. I think your point that you can't really escape surveillance cameras at this point in 2022, 2023, I think is very valid. This doesn't seem well thought out on this guy's part. The suspect, Kohberger, seems to just be losing sight of the fact that his cell phone is a radio, truth be told. And all of us have them. We've all gotten so comfortable with them. But as you're saying, it's pinging off cell phone towers, and through triangulation, that is, they can determine pretty closely where you are, or at least where your cell phone.
And we just take for granted that we have this. Again, I like your idea of digital breadcrumbs. We have this all the time with us 24/7. I don't know how you feel when you realize you've left your phone at home, but it's a scary feeling. We are so increasingly dependent on these devices that I get a little anxious if I even walk out of my classroom without my phone in my pocket.
I know.
Just in case I need it, in case there's an emergency or something. But I can't even imagine trying to leave the house without my phone, because I use it for everything. Even when I do my workouts, I have an app, a Strava app that I use, and that tracks my GPS at all times because it tells me where I've gone, how far I've gone. And every time that I'm done with a run, I get a nice little map that shows me every location that I've run to in and around my neighborhood. I always laugh a little bit when people talk about they're worried about giving DNA because the government can invade your privacy. You have no privacy as long as you've got this phone in your hand, friends and neighbors.
It sailed the day you first signed up for your first email address. It was over. People getting so obsessed about their privacy, and yet they put up information every single day about themselves, their families, their whereabouts, what they're doing, who they're doing it with. And I'm not saying I don't do it too. I do as well. Yeah. We all do. Yeah. That cell phone is a data tracker. And I almost likened going out without your cell phone as feeling like I've forgotten my pants.
Feels that way.
Yeah. You're like, wait, where's my phone? And Pamela and I have a long-standing joke here at the house, which is, We don't say I've lost something anymore. We say I've temporarily misplaced. It's inevitably the thing you're looking for, which is often glasses, phone, wallet, important stuff like that. Keys. Yeah, car keys, very important. These things are not really lost. And then, of course, with the cell phones, now there are apps that will actually tell you where your cell phone is.
Yeah, or you get the little tile that you can attach to it, and or air tags or something like that.
Yep.
There's never a way to really be without these things, and we have become so used to having these phones with us all the time. Even both of us we are the pre-cell phone generation.
Correct.
We remember a time without cell phones. My students, for example, do not remember a time before cell phones. We remember that you used to be able to go outside to run errands and you didn't have a little digital device that you're constantly wondering, where is it? Do I have it? And we use it for everything. We use it for Apple Pay. We use it for all of this stuff. It's really remarkable. And then looking at something like this, where I'm watching them track Bryan Kohberger's movements, it's like any one of us can be tracked in this very same way. Every single one of us. It just can't be stated enough. This is a really good piece of police work here. All right, back to the affidavit. At approximately 12:46 p.m., the 8458 phone utilized cellular data in the area of the Albertsons grocery store at 400 Bridge Street in Clarkston, Washington. Surveillance footage obtained from the Albertsons showed Kohberger exit the white Elantra, consistent with suspect vehicle 1, at approximately 12:49 p.m. Interior surveillance cameras showed Kohberger walk through the store, purchase unknown items at the checkout, and leave at approximately 1:04 p.m. Kohberger's possible path of travel is depicted below. There's a little map here with arrows. Additional analysis of records for the 8458 phone indicated that between approximately 5:32 p.m. and 5:36 p.m., the 8458 phone utilized cellular resources that provide coverage to Johnson, Idaho. The 8458 phone then stops reporting to the network from approximately 5:36 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. That is consistent with the 8458 phone being the area that the 8458 phone traveled in the hours immediately following the suspected time the homicides occurred.
So he seems to be in the habit of turning off his cell phone at different times, but only sporadically and always around key times that involve the murders themselves. This might have been smarter if he had been in the habit of leaving the phone at home when he was going by on what I will call these stalking visits to their neighborhood.
Yeah.
It just seems it occurs to him, but only occasionally and only at key moments, to turn his cell phone off for a few hours. He seems to be forgetting that the phone is always tracking him, and that the history of movement that they're building with the surveillance cameras and his cell phone together are able to show a great deal of detail of where he, or at least his phone, and the Elantra are at multiple times in the several weeks and months prior to the murders.
Agreed. Back to the affidavit. On December 27, 2022, Pennsylvania agents recovered the trash from the Kohberger family residence located in Albertsville, Pennsylvania. That evidence was sent to the Idaho State Lab for testing. On December 28, 2022, the Idaho State Lab reported that a DNA profile obtained from the trash and the DNA profile obtained from the sheath identified a male as not being excluded as the biological father of suspect profile. At least 99.9998% of the male population would be expected to be excluded from the possibility of being the suspect's biological father.
I would add here that I'm highly confident that there was additional DNA analysis done on the DNA from the sheath. The button of the sheath had what was probably touch DNA. My guess is that there are probably multiple other sources of DNA. I'd be very surprised if he wasn't sweating, which there could be droplets at any number of locations. He has supposedly, allegedly, stabbed 4 people brutally with a very large knife, which would require a significant amount of physical exertion. There's a very strong possibility he could have cut himself in stabbing 4 people with a very large K-bar style knife. And so there's a very good chance that there may be DNA left behind at multiple locations. The fact that it's not mentioned in the affidavit doesn't mean that law enforcement doesn't have additional evidence. I also think the paragraph you just read, Kristin, indicates a confirmation, not necessarily the first time he's been identified via DNA. I think a lot more will come out on this when we go to trial in June 2023.
Exactly. All right, finishing up the affidavit. Based on the above information, I am requesting an arrest warrant be issued for Bryan C. Kohberger, DOB 11/21/1994, for burglary at 1122 King Street in Moscow, Idaho, and 4 counts of murder in the first degree for the murders of Madison Mogen, Kaylee Goncalves, Zana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin.
Very important. Note that the murders are listed in a particular order. Normally, in a legal document, they'd be listed alphabetically. Please note that they are not listed alphabetically. I believe this is the sequence of the murders: Madison Mogen, Kaylee Goncalves, Zana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin. I believe that law enforcement actually is telling us that's the order their research to that point has shown the murders to have taken place. As Cheryl McCollum pointed out to us in our recent episode of Mind Over Murder, she believes that the murders start on the 3rd floor, which would involve Madison Mogen and Kaylee Goncalves, and then are followed by murders on the 2nd floor that would lead to the deaths of Zana Kernodle and Ethan Chapin. At first, I couldn't figure out the order they were showing these young people's names, and I thought, this is odd. They should be alphabetical, which is much more typical. And law enforcement people, they do say law and order. They do tend to be ordered people, and they are writing a legal document that will ultimately provide at least a template for some of the prosecution. This is the order they believe the murders took place. 1, 2, 3, 4.
It's also important to make sure that anybody who is not familiar with the term murder in the first degree understands what precisely that means. Murder in the first degree, according to Justia.com, murder in the first degree is the most serious of all homicide offenses. It involves any intentional murder that is willful and premeditated with malice aforethought. Willful and premeditated. Okay. He was stalking these people. We know this already. We know it from the 12 times that his phone pinged outside of the house adjacent to it. Willful and premeditated. This was not a random act. This is a guy who had been planning this for a while.
I agree, and I would close with this thought. I believe that law enforcement, Moscow PD, Idaho State Police, and the FBI have done an outstanding job in this case. They've solved this case quickly, and I believe they will build a very powerful case against the suspect.
Absolutely. And so we look forward to continuing developments. We are sure that there will be more of them. And as more information becomes available on this case, we will continue to report it. That's going to wrap it up for this episode of Mind Over Murder. We'll see you next time.
Mind Over Murder is a production of Absolute Zero and Another Dog Productions.
Our executive producers are Bill Thomas and Kristin Dilley.
Our logo art is by Pamela Arnois.
Our theme music is by Kevin MacLeod.
Mind Over Murder is distributed in partnership with Crawl Space Media.
You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram.
You can also follow our page on the Colonial Parkway Murders on Facebook.
And finally, you can follow Bill Thomas on Twitter at BillThomas5. 856.
Thank you for listening to Mind Over Murder.